I recognize the member from Rostern Shellbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's truly an honour for me to honor and a pleasure for me to stand here in this Assembly today and enter into this debate on our 2014-2015, our balanced summary budget that was delivered by our Finance Minister in this Assembly yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Just at the outset, I'd like to just make a couple of acknowledgements, and as often happens in the Assembly, I would like to acknowledge my constituency assistant who was down yesterday to observe the proceedings on Budget Day. She headed back today, Mr. Speaker, to get ahead of the snow on the roads a little bit, but Miss Sally Fitch, who is the eyes and the ears and the face of the constituency office in Rostern Shellbrook. And as well my family, Mr. Speaker. As I've alluded to before, no individual serves in this Assembly alone. It definitely is a family effort, and I'd like to acknowledge my son, who's in university up at Saskatoon, and quite frankly got a summer job here the other day in his field. I'm thrilled about that. So is he. And my daughter. We're all thrilled. And my daughter, Mr. Speaker, who wakes up with a grin on her face every day and attends school, attends dance, taking up snowboarding this winter, Mr. Speaker. The love and laughter that she approaches every day of her life is truly inspiring for myself, Mr. Speaker, and my wife. My wife, Krista, is truly my best friend and my rock, and she is a good woman to put up with me the last 20 years, most definitely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the third budget that I have taken part in since I was elected in 2011, and I can't help but think, and I'm sure many in this Assembly can relate, that this budget was just a little bit different maybe than the last two I've seen and the ones previous to that, Mr. Speaker. And I think it has the opportunity to be quite a bit different, Mr. Speaker, when we come to voting on it, because when I watched the Minister of Finance release the budget yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and when he announced that there's going to be no tax increases in this budget, no personal tax increases, no education tax, property tax increases, Mr. Speaker, and specifically no increases to the credit unions' tax incentives that they receive, Mr. Speaker. I saw members of the opposition applaud that initiative, Mr. Speaker, and I was encouraged that they might have a look at this and vote in favour of this budget, Mr. Speaker, and make it a unanimous vote in this Assembly. Mr. Speaker, there's also applause across the way from opposition members when our Finance Minister announced that in addition to the 9 joint-use education facilities that have been announced previously this year, there will be additional renovations to many schools, as well as 2 more facilities, Mr. Speaker, 2 more education facilities right here in Regina, being Connaught and Sacred Heart School, that will be funded in this coming budget, Mr. Speaker. And the members opposite acknowledged that with applause yesterday, and I again was encouraged that we may have a unanimous vote when it comes time to vote on this budget. Mr. Speaker, one other note, and something that makes this budget maybe just a little bit different than many of the others or a couple of the others that I've seen in this Assembly, but many of the others most significantly since 2004. Mr. Speaker, in 2004, this government moved, and to the NDP's credit, they were in government at that time, but they moved to reporting on not only the GRF, Mr. Speaker, but the summary financial basis. And it's been that way, Mr. Speaker, up until yesterday. Yesterday, this Finance Minister in this Assembly, Mr. Speaker, tabled a budget, or introduced a budget, Mr. Speaker, that focuses on the summary financial statements, Mr. Speaker. This is something that the provincial auditors asked for, and it's something that this Premier, this Finance Minister, and this Saskatchewan Party government delivered yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I would like to read, actually, the acting provincial auditor's comments on yesterday's budget, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to read them into the record. I think they're significant and they're important in light of the budget that was announced yesterday. And this is a provincial auditor, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Our office strongly supports these changes. They will eliminate confusion and help legislators and the public better understand the government's finances." Mr. Speaker, that's the acting provincial auditor, Ms. Judy Ferguson's comments on yesterday's budget that was introduced in this Assembly. Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm encouraged that the members of the opposition will be supporting this budget, and it'll be a unanimous budget, as a member from Rosemount, Mr. Speaker, has been on his feet or asking questions in excess of 120 times, calling on the government to report on summary financial statements, and it happened yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to a vote on this budget next week. But, Mr. Speaker, more specifically to this budget that was announced or released in this chamber yesterday, this budget is most definitely about steady growth for the province of Saskatchewan. This budget contains, as I said, no tax increases, which were popular with all of the members of the Assembly, and this budget controls spending. Mr. Speaker, this budget continues to make investments in infrastructure for our Saskatchewan communities, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, this budget continues to invest in Saskatchewan's most valuable resource, and that's our people. Mr. Speaker, it continues the province of Saskatchewan on a path of fiscal responsibility, and this summary financial budget that was released in this Assembly yesterday, Mr. Speaker, most importantly, was balanced. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it had a $71 million surplus. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that this balanced budget did not come easily. It's only through the concerted effort of our finance minister, our members of cabinet, and their ministry officials, Mr. Speaker, as well as input from caucus, and very importantly, the cooperation of stakeholders across the province, that we're able to control spending and introduce a balanced budget like we were yesterday, Mr. Speaker. And this balanced budget is exactly what the people of Saskatchewan have come to expect from this government, Mr. Speaker. We've introduced numerous balanced budgets. We did it again yesterday, and it's precisely what the members of the province of Saskatchewan, or the people of Saskatchewan, expect on budget day from the Saskatchewan Party government. I would like to note, however, that the easier route to take in this instance, Mr. Speaker, because there is spending pressures, there is people that need money for different projects. We realize that, Mr. Speaker. But the easier route would have been to maybe not make some of these tougher decisions and not to control the spending of the government of Saskatchewan. And this ultimately would allow deficits to creep in. And Mr. Speaker, this has been shown all too often in many jurisdictions across North America that this has actually been the case, in particular in recent years. Mr. Speaker, not so in Saskatchewan. In reality, the reality in Saskatchewan is quite simply this, Mr. Speaker. In 2007, residents of Saskatchewan have experienced the largest income tax reduction in the history of the province, Mr. Speaker. In fact, nearly 112,000 people no longer pay any provincial income tax at all. Mr. Speaker, since 2007, the people of Saskatchewan have had the largest property tax reduction in the history of the province, Mr. Speaker. Those are the facts. Just this week, Mr. Speaker, it was reported that our population continued to grow in the year 2013 by more than 20,000 people. Mr. Speaker, this now means that 1,117,503 people are now calling this province home. This makes Saskatchewan the second fastest growing province in the Dominion of Canada and puts us well on our plan to reach our growth plan goal of 1.2 million by the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, when we introduce budgets into this Assembly, they are an outlook of the next year of how the government is going to spend the people of Saskatchewan's, or invest the people of Saskatchewan's money throughout the next year. But they are really, in essence, an outlook through that year, and some on either side. But, Mr. Speaker, I heard some allusions in the member from Lakeview's speech about long-term plan and suggest that we don't have a plan. And I would very quickly refer him to the Saskatchewan Plan for Growth, Mr. Speaker. If he looked in that booklet, he would very quickly see that the amendment about cuts and crumbs, and that's I didn't hear after that, but I heard cuts and crumbs, Mr. Speaker, which very precisely is not a long-term plan for Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. So I encourage members opposite to have a look in the Saskatchewan plan for growth. That plan for growth, Mr. Speaker, again, was a vision by Saskatchewan people for Saskatchewan people. Mr. Speaker, the budgets that we introduce in this Assembly are really, in essence, rungs in the ladder to achieving the goals in that plan for growth. And Mr. Speaker, when I look in that plan for growth, I go to the page with the 6 core growth activities, and when I look at our budget, I look at how our budget ties into those growth activities, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to say that this one does in a very large way. First of all, this balanced summary budget that was introduced yesterday by our Finance Minister enhances the Saskatchewan plan for growth by investing in infrastructure projects required for that growth. First of all, Mr. Speaker, infrastructure projects are most notable in the Ministry of Highways in the investment of almost $665 million to build and to operate and to maintain our provincial highway system. Mr. Speaker, over $400 million of this money is a direct investment in capital programs to catch up on the billion-dollar CAA identified deficit that we inherited in 2007, but also capital plans, Mr. Speaker, to deal with the growth that we have as we move forward in Saskatchewan. Capital plans such as the twinning of the number 16 highway from Saskatoon to Clavette, Mr. Speaker. Pre-construction work is going to be done for twinning projects involving highways between Regina, Estevan and Beanfate, as well as from Saskatoon to Delisle. Mr. Speaker, these are all high-growth areas. There's also growth in the industrial sector in these areas, so there's trucks on the road, Mr. Speaker, and there's efforts being made to make those highways safer and to move more traffic down them. Mr. Speaker, there's passing lane pre-construction work being done for highway number 7 between Delisle and Rosetown. Again, Mr. Speaker, a highway with ever-increasing capacity and as well trucks on the road. Something that is a little near and dear to my heart, Mr. Speaker, is the Municipal Roads for the Economy program, which is funded again this year with $25.5 million. Mr. Speaker, through my work as Legislative Secretary to our Minister of Agriculture, I've had the opportunity to meet with a number of different agribusinesses and value-added food processors and different businesses within the ag industry. And Mr. Speaker, these places have a lot of product coming in by truck and a lot of processed product going out by truck, and they don't always have the luxury of being located right on one of our provincial highways. This heavy truck traffic that going in and out of the plants, Mr. Speaker, it's hard on the access roads, and the Municipal Roads for the Economy program is a program that supports Saskatchewan business. It supports the expansion of Saskatchewan business, and it's a good program for the agricultural processing business in Saskatchewan. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, anyone that's been through Saskatoon or in Saskatoon or tried to move through Saskatoon by vehicle in the last number of years, the unprecedented growth in Saskatoon, Mr. Speaker, has caused traffic challenges. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's anyone that has moved around in that city that hasn't noticed the benefits of the South Bypass in Saskatoon. I know I sure have, as we're in there frequently as I'm through the city as well. And Mr. Speaker, this budget, there is a commitment to work with the City of Saskatoon as well as the federal government to look at methods to fund the North Commuter Bridge in Saskatoon, Mr. Speaker, which will again affect and improve traffic flow in one of our greatest growing or fastest growing cities. Mr. Speaker, I believe one of the fastest growing cities in Canada at the moment. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about infrastructure, talked a little bit about highways, but I'd be remiss if I didn't add a few comments in on healthcare, Mr. Speaker, and some of the infrastructure in healthcare. As a matter of fact, there's nearly $95 million that's being invested in Saskatchewan's healthcare projects across the province, Mr. Speaker. And again, to speak about something that I have some experience with and something that is near and dear to me is some of the funding that's available for the 13 long-term care facilities that were announced a number of years ago, Mr. Speaker. As everyone knows here, we had the opportunity to open one of those integrated facilities in the community where I live. Mr. Speaker, it's up, it's operational with full services, and it's paid for. Mr. Speaker, there's $27 million in this budget to continue work on 5 more of those facilities that are going in Biggar, Kelvington, Kipling, Maple Creek, and Prince Albert. There's also, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, $16 million for the completion of the new hospital in the Moose Jaw. Mr. Speaker, something else a little closer to home to the constituency of Rosthern Shelbrook to do with health care, Mr. Speaker, and this is an important project moving forward. These projects take some time, but is the funding, the $2.5 million, or sorry, this is in North Battleford, the $2.5 million for the early stage funding in the Saskatchewan Hospital, and I know my constituency gets right up into close to North Battleford. I know my colleague from the Battlefords is happy to see that project moving forward, Mr. Speaker, and that'll be an interesting project as we move through the next number of years, not only for the community in North Battleford, but the Saskatchewan Hospital services the province of Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, in Prince Albert, we have the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital, which is a regional facility, Mr. Speaker. It's my facility. It's where my daughter was born. When my son breaks his ankle, that's where we go to have his ankle reset, Mr. Speaker. It's a facility for many. He's broken some of his ankles. But, Mr. Speaker, it's a catchment facility. It's a regional facility, not only for the communities surrounding Prince Albert, such as the community where I live in Shelburne or Leask or Birch Hills, but it also is a catchment for health care for the entire North, Mr. Speaker. And when I speak of the North, I speak of all of up in the tree line and north there, Mr. Speaker. I know there's a couple of members opposite that have self-anointed him as the voice of the North in this building, which is precisely not true, Mr. Speaker. We have a member across the tree line from Carrot River. We have members from Prince Albert, Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan Rivers, across Meadow Lake, Mr. Speaker, right across to Lloydminster. And then the investment in the PA Victoria Hospital in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker, to further the construction planning for that facility, Mr. Speaker, is appreciated by northern Saskatchewan in its entirety. Mr. Speaker, there's also increased funding for the 24 additional beds at the Pineview Terrace in Prince Albert as well, and a couple other items within healthcare that maybe are just off the infrastructure topic a little bit, but nonetheless important, Mr. Speaker, is the funding to enhance primary healthcare model in many of our communities and the funding to get the other 3 collaborative emergency centres up and rolling, Mr. Speaker. We have Shaunavon going, we have Maidstone going, and I know in our constituency we have the community of Spiritwood working closely with the health region to get their collaborative emergency centre up and going this year. Mr. Speaker, there's investment again in the Rural Family Physician Recruitment Program to create that locum pool to bring stability to our rural facilities, as well as investment, Mr. Speaker, in house calls for seniors, as well as hotspotting to recognize those individuals that require a little bit more care and a little bit to assist a high-risk and high-needs patients, Mr. Speaker, in the province of Saskatchewan. Some exciting investments in healthcare, not only on the capital side, but also on the service delivery side, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back to my 6 core items of the growth plan. This balanced summary budget enhances the Saskatchewan plan for growth by educating, by training, and by developing a skilled workforce. Mr. Speaker, to educate and train a skilled workforce, I think it's best to start with the children. Mr. Speaker, this budget definitely does that by an addition of 500 new childcare spaces. These have been to bring this to a local level, Mr. Speaker. Last June 18th, I attended the grand opening of the Love and Laughter Child Care Centre in the community of Spiritwood. This April 5th, so just coming up here right away, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to attend another grand opening in the community of Shelburne for the Happy Hearts Child Care that's going to break ground here. Sorry, not a grand opening. They're going to break ground on a new facility. And we have some other communities that are looking at this important initiative as well, and it gets your kids into the frequency of later getting to school. Following that, Mr. Speaker, another $20 million in pre-K programs, which have also been noticed in many communities across the province, but also in our constituency. And there's steady growth in our schools, Mr. Speaker, very steady growth. Last year there was interim growth funding for school divisions in Saskatchewan, and this year there's an increase of over $19 million in operating funding for our school divisions. Mr. Speaker, there's much needed facilities that are on the horizon. In addition to, like I had mentioned, the 9 joint use facilities that were announced earlier this year, there's also an announcement in this year's budget to replace the Connaught and Sacred Heart School and using whatever methods of funding, Mr. Speaker. These initiatives have been noticed by the Saskatchewan School Board Association, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to enter in a quote from Janet Ford, the president of SSBI, on the record here, and it goes like this, and I quote, "School boards are currently facing close to $700 million backlog of education infrastructure funding. And with the average age of a K-12 education facilities being 50 years old, this is a serious problem for students. Today's announcement that the government will provide additional capital funding outside the previous P3 announcements is much welcome news, says Ford. Close quote. Mr. Speaker, as we move out of the primary system into the post-secondary system, which I personally am having some experience with now with my son being there, post-secondary funding in general has received an increase, Mr. Speaker, of $24 million, or 3.7% increase in advanced ed funding. Mr. Speaker, $17 million, oh, pardon me. In addition, in this, Mr. Speaker, there's $216 million that are provided in student supports for post-secondary education students. Mr. Speaker, there's $7 million for the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship. Mr. Speaker, there's $7.5 million in this budget for SAGES, or the Saskatchewan Advantage Grant for Education Savings, which I have had many questions about over the last number of weeks and months leading into this, Mr. Speaker. People are interested in this program. And my personal favorite, Mr. Speaker, the personal favorite student support program, because I hope my son will be part of this one day, is the $82 million for the Saskatchewan Grad Retention Program. Mr. Speaker. He gets the money and I won't get the money, but that's fine. This budget, Mr. Speaker, just to jump back to healthcare and healthcare training, this budget also provides for increasing our nurse training seats, Mr. Speaker. It further increases our seats at the College of Medicine in getting to our goal of 100 College of Medicine seats for our physicians. It further increases our medical residency positions, Mr. Speaker, with the ultimate goal of 120 medical residents working in the province, and it adds 5 more nurse practitioners training seats so that we're at 15, well on our way to meeting our goal of 20 by the year of 2015-16. Mr. Speaker, this balanced summary budget enhances Saskatchewan growth plan by supporting increased trade, increased investment, and increased exports. This begins with $500,000 to initiate the startup of the Manufacturing Centre of Excellence. Also investment in STEP, Mr. Speaker, or the Saskatchewan Trader Export Partnership, and we all know how beneficial STEP has been to our exporting partners in the province. Mr. Speaker, this government, and more specifically, this Premier, are engaged in supporting Saskatchewan's trade, Saskatchewan's investments, and Saskatchewan's exports each and every day. This is recently most notable, Mr. Speaker, by this government's efforts on the grain transportation file. Mr. Speaker, it was this government that started to engage with the railway industries last spring. It was this Minister of Agriculture that engaged with the railways and the grain companies last spring in working through a plan to move crops to the port. Mr. Speaker, it was the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Highways that continued those discussions with logistics groups throughout the summer into the winter. And Mr. Speaker, here, when we hit a roadblock through this winter with grain transportation, it was this Premier, Mr. Speaker, that appointed a delegation to meet with stakeholders within the industry, with rail companies, with producers, and with grain companies to find a solution to this very real economic challenge to our province and to our agricultural producers. Mr. Speaker, in all my travels the last few months, visiting with all these stakeholders, whether it be farmers, grain companies, railways, we heard some great input on the different measures that would have to occur to clear this grain backlog. And that input, Mr. Speaker, was relayed to the federal government through our Minister of Agriculture and our Premier prior to the order in council that was put through not too long ago. And Mr. Speaker, most recently, that through our Minister of Agriculture has communicated more information on what this government feels that Saskatchewan needs in the way of regulations with the legislation that will be coming before our federal government here shortly. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, these have been compiled and communicated. We're unsure whether the opposition has had any communications on this file, Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, with anybody. Mr. Speaker, throughout all my travels, and in particular those travels with producers the last number of months, when we talked about the grain transportation file, and I want to make this clear, not once not once, in all of the producers I talked to, did I hear this statement. Not once did I hear, boy, it sure is a good thing that the NDP are making you guys address this grain transportation file.
John Nielsen.
Never heard it. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that in 63 times that that leader of that opposition has gotten to his feet to ask a question, he not once has asked a question on behalf of Saskatchewan agriculture and Saskatchewan business on the grain transportation file. Mr. Speaker, producers in this province and people connected with agriculture are fully aware of the lack of engagement of the NDP and in particular the leader of the NDP when it comes to agricultural issues. Mr. Speaker, on the grain transportation, the lack of grain transportation in this province, Mr. Speaker, it's not an issue that just affects agriculture in our province. This is an issue that goes right down Main Street, Mr. Speaker. It affects every business on Main Street in every community across this province, big or small, and it was the largest economic challenge that I've seen since I've been elected, Mr. Speaker, and it's my hopes that we're through our efforts as a province and as a federal government that we're well on our way to providing a long-term solution to this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back to our core growth goals of the Saskatchewan Growth Plan. This balanced summary budget enhances Saskatchewan's plan for growth by advancing Saskatchewan's natural resource strengths. Mr. Speaker, it's this provincial government that has been very outspoken and a proactive approach to transporting our export products to an exportable port facility by any means necessary that are safe, efficient, and good for the economy, Mr. Speaker, and most notably, I point to a motion on March the 12th moved by the member from Lloydminster, the Minister of Energy, in support of the Gateway Pipeline. Mr. Speaker, thank goodness the people of Saskatchewan have entrusted enough people to vote in favour of our economy and transporting our goods safely to a port position. As that motion passed with no help, Mr. Speaker, no help, as the members opposite voted against it. Mr. Speaker, this balanced summary budget that was introduced yesterday in this House enhances Saskatchewan's plan for growth by ensuring the ongoing competitiveness of Saskatchewan's economy through things like supporting safe, reliable transportation methods for oil, Mr. Speaker, by advocating for the grain industry so that they can get their product to port. Mr. Speaker, this is something that happens each and every day in this government, not just on budget day. Mr. Speaker, as I roamed the building yesterday talking with different people and talking about the business climate in Saskatchewan and how the budget would affect the business climate in Saskatchewan, I heard two things. The first thing I heard, the budget was balanced. The second thing I heard, Mr. Speaker, was the fact that there are no tax increases in this budget. Mr. Speaker, a balanced budget taking into account all government entities and no tax increases in that budget are good news for the ongoing competitiveness of Saskatchewan business. And the CFIB agrees with it, as the Marilyn Braun-Poland tweeted yesterday, pleased the Saskatchewan budget is balanced and doesn't hike education property taxes. A great tweet. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, the last core growth plan goal in the plan for growth is fiscal responsibility. What am I going to say? The budget's balanced. It's a summary focused budget this year, Mr. Speaker, for the first time that we're introduced yesterday here today, Mr. Speaker. It's balanced. It's got no tax increases in it, Mr. Speaker. That is showing the fiscal responsibility that the people of Saskatchewan have come to respect from this government. Mr. Speaker, this is a good budget for Saskatchewan. It's a balanced budget. It's a transparent budget, and it focuses on reporting on the summary financial basis. Mr. Speaker, again, I asked the members opposite, and I asked them individually to some degree, the Regina members and more specifically the member from Elphinstone.